welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Thursday afternoon. Joining us from Los Angeles, California, Dave McMenamin.
What's up, Brian? What's up, Tim?
And that is Dave jumping in front of me and introducing from Dallas, Texas, Van McMahon.
Howdy, partners. I like the backyard Mac 10. I mean, going for the Slater vibes there.
Yeah, that's jungly. This is one with nature in the off season. That's something we can all strive to try to achieve.
Well, there's another guy in LA in a good mood right now, and that's James Harden. Because today he signed a 3-year, $97 million, fully guaranteed contract with the Cavs with a player option. God bless America.
Well, listen, he worked with him, and it worked out well for him.
We'll talk about that aspect of it in a few minutes here. But so we had a mid-August sign and trade. I'm going to tell you, I just want to be real here. Like, there's some good agenting that has been done here because for Rich Paul and his colleagues at Clutch to pull off getting Peyton Watson signed and traded in the middle of August with no cap space out there in where the Cavs had to do a 5-team trade to execute it. Like, seriously, you can say whatever you want. You can say I'm pandering. Go ahead. I don't really care. If you say that, you don't know. That's pretty good work by Rich Paul. And Peyton Watson comes out of this pretty good considering the landscape. He gets 4 years and $88 million with a player option. I don't understand why everybody and their brother gets a player option these days, but that's out of the barn and down around the corner. McMahon, Peyton Watson gets 4 years, $88 million. The Cavs do all kinds of different things to get this player. There's a lot of aspects of this to go through. The Cavs aspect, the Nuggets aspect, the Clippers aspect. Let's start with the Cavs.
I actually want to start with my aspect.
Okay.
I had a bet with Bontemps that Peyton Watson would get more than mid-level. This is significantly more than mid-level. So just as soon as the NBA league office gets done with this aspiration investigation, I'm going to ask them to determine whether Bontemps, as a team employee, can still pay off a bet that he made before he was hired. So there's that. But yeah, for the Cavs, listen, man, this didn't come without a cost. And, the 2031 pick, okay. But the cost, as you mentioned when you basically very accurately forecasted this deal on our last pod, is they really thinned out the depth of the roster. And I think you can kind of look at it as they need Peyton Watson to come in and be an upgrade to the combined production of Max Strus, who was hurt most of last year, but Max Strus and Dean Wade. Now, if he produces like he did last year, which unfortunately was cut short due to injuries, and I think this is going to be a pretty sweet deal for them. He's obviously a young guy, extremely athletic. I think they have one of the best defensive front courts in the league now, putting him alongside Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And then last year he had a great really good breakout offensive season where he shot at almost 50% from the floor and better than 40% from 3-point range, a much higher volume than he had in the past. But he got paid on a pretty small sample size of production.
Yeah, Dave, in January and February, before he got his hamstring injury. Now, there were other injuries affecting the Nuggets at the time, which is one of the reasons why he got the opportunity. But in January and February, Peyton Watson went on an 18-game stretch where he started all 18 games. He averaged 36 minutes. So this is a guy who's averaged in the low to mid-20s before that. So he was getting full-on starters minutes. I don't have this looked up. He probably was probably one of the NBA leaders in minutes during that stretch because the Nuggets just didn't have depth and they were banged up. So he was averaging 36 minutes. In that stretch, he averaged 21 points and shot 45% from three. He also averaged 5 rebounds and 3 assists. And so the question really is that 18-game stretch before he pulled his hamstring, is that the current Peyton Watson? Is that Peyton Watson 4 years into his career, now age 23, heading into his prime, 6'8", excellent shot blocker for a wing. Is that the Peyton Watson? Because if that's Peyton Watson, Dave, the Cavs doing a 5-team trade and giving away a whole bunch of players, that's a hell of a pickup. Or is Peyton Watson the guy who he was before and after that, which is a guy who's a quality piece, a starter quality piece, but averages, 12, 13 points and has, for his career, shot under 40% from three?
Well, do they want him to be that guy who had those numbers for the 18 games? Because part of it, as you alluded to, was because of the reason Nuggets had players who were also out during that stretch. So he was thrust into a larger role. What they want him to be is a dynamic two-way threat who can also be a clamp down defender on the perimeter when you already have Mobley and Allen patrolling down in the paint, be able to make open shots. But I mean, the ball's going to be in Donovan Mitchell's hands and James Harden's hands. He's, I think, for sure, third on that pecking order in terms of shot attempts per game. Now, obviously, in transition, you want to get him the ball. He can finish, 6'8", long, good athlete. Get him to the foul line. Obviously, those type of scenarios to get his touches and get his minutes, get his kind of numbers that way. But I think what the Cavs got is just an addition of talent when, as you mentioned, they had lost some talent. And as good as Max Strus was the first year after they acquired him from Miami, he was not really a part of their team last year. And so in this particular deal, you are giving up the future first-round pick, but you're not really giving up a player that last year's team relied on.
Well, so here's the thing. So during that stretch of games, because of the injuries the Nuggets had, including, Jokic being out, the ball was in Peyton Watson's hand. So his usage rate in December, I'm slicing the season up, but in December when he was a starter and playing 28 minutes a game, his usage rate was 17. Mm-hmm. Okay. His usage rate in January when he played all those games and all those minutes, his usage rate jumped to 27. So part of the reason why he got that huge surge in output was because the Nuggets were in trouble. They put the ball in his hand and said, "Peyton, you make some plays for us," and he did.
He kept him afloat.
And I'm going to say this: let's take a look at the Cavs roster now, because here's the thing. This trade, it looks like Max Strus, a first and a second for Peyton Watson, but that's not really what the Cavs did. Yeah. If you look at where they were to start the offseason, and they were a second apron team last year, okay? But they let Dean Wade walk in free agency. They let Keon Ellis walk in free agency. They trade Dennis Schroeder. They did two moves, basically, to get off Dennis Schroeder's money. They traded for Trey Mann, and then they flipped Trey Mann for Cam Whitmore, who they waived and stretched. And those series of transactions got off of Schroeder's money. But still, they had to get off of Schroeder's money to enable them to sign and trade for Peyton Watson, because you're hard capped under the first apron if you acquire a player, sign and trade. So even though those players didn't go to Denver, those players came off the Cavs roster to make it happen. So really, the Cavs are down Ellis, Strus, Wade, Schroeder, okay, and the first-round pick, the unprotected 2031 first-round pick. All of those things came off their roster. So here's what's left. Now, they do have two roster spots, and I expect them to fill those roster spots. But as we sit here right now, their starting point guard is James Harden. Their backup point guard is Craig Porter, who's been at times backup for them, but has been mostly a third-string guard. Maybe he's going to be really good. That's their backup point guard. Their backup three behind Peyton Watson is Mario Hezonja, who has a non-guaranteed contract, who's coming over after 6 years playing in Europe. I don't even know if he's going to work. And then other than that, you have Jalen Tyson and Sam Merrill. Those are like their 2-3 backups. So behind Donovan Mitchell and Peyton Watson, it's Sam Merrill, Mario Hezonja, Jalen Tyson. I'll throw in Tyrese Proctor, who was their second-round pick in 2025. Like, maybe he's ready to play minutes. But I was just going to say, 2 years ago when the Cavs had that 60-win season, if you remember that roster that they had, okay, they had, Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, but their backups were Ty Jerome, who got 6 Man of the Year votes, DeAndre Hunter, who I know had a bad year last year and got traded, but he got 6 Man of the Year votes, Dean Wade, who's the starter most of last year, Karis LeVert, still a key rotation player in the NBA. Sam Merrill, Isaac Okoro, they had 11 or 12 players that they really could rely on. So here's their bench now. Craig Porter, Jalen Tyson, Sam Merrill, and their 2 backup bigs behind Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. As of today, now they have roster spots, but take a look at their free agents. When you do a deal that creates roster spots and you need minimums in July, you have a choice. When you do that deal in August, your choices are way down. Their backup bigs, McMahon, do you even know who their 2 backup bigs are? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If you can tell me
Bryant's one of them.
Thomas Bryant is their backup center. If you know who their backup 4 is, by the way, I couldn't probably do this for other teams. I couldn't tell you the Mavericks too deep. Their backup 4, as of right now, is Naquan Tomlin, who was on a 2-way to start last season. So, listen, that starting 5, Harden, Mitchell, Watson, Mobley, and Allen, is pretty good. And if Peyton Watson, look, the hardest thing to get in the NBA is athletic 2-way wings, right? That's the hardest. I mean, the superstar is the hardest thing to acquire. But if you're trying to build out your team, that's why the Knicks paid so dearly to get Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, because getting those types of wings are hard. The Cavs think they got one in Watson, and they think that Jalen Tyson, who's their young rookie, can develop into a key 2-way wing. But the Cavs are awfully thin right now. Okay, now here's the second part of this deal. To allow this to happen, remember that James Harden opted out of a contract that would have paid him $43 million this year. Now, that contract was not fully guaranteed. It was only guaranteed $12 million. But the truth is the Cavs weren't going to cut him. Right. He's their franchise point guard. So if he had opted into that contract, they would have paid him the $43 million. He was getting the money, okay? So James Harden was willing to opt out of that contract and sit around all summer and basically pick up the phone whenever the Cavs called, calling his agents more than anything, but and say, yeah, I'll go down a little farther. And so as the Cavs made various moves, Harden not only was willing to reduce his salary, but he was willing to recruit. He, from what I understand, and I assume Donovan Mitchell was too, I haven't heard this, but he recruited Peyton Watson. He was on I guess at the Fanatics Fest where you hung out, Dave. You had a fun couple of days there.
Yeah.
At the Javits Center. They were both there, and at that time, the Cavs were recruiting Watson, and Harden was with him and recruited him. And Watson is from LA and Harden is from LA, and they had some connection there, even though they're, I think 13 years apart. And so the bill came due, McMahon. The bill came due. And so James Harden gets a 3-year, $97 million contract, all guaranteed. And the third year is a player option.
I bet you he'll pick that option up.
Well, or he'll opt out of it and do this again in a couple years.
He'll be pretty old to be opting out of it at that point. But
he's turning 37 next week. Happy birthday!
Yeah, so
early
this is
to
for
James.
37, 38, 39.
This contract will take. Well, I'll stop on that. McMahon, 3 years, $97 million for fully guaranteed for James Harden. God bless America.
Listen, man, the Cavs are all in on right now, and they're trying to kind of, which is a tough spot to be. You're all in on right now with real questions about your bench, and not a whole lot of ways you can go about upgrade. Aren't they hard cap now as well?
Yes, they are.
So, to upgrade the bench even during the season is going to be extremely difficult. To be able to pull that off. And, Watson is kind of a combination of being all in now and trying to give yourself some long-term upside. And I do think he has long-term upsides. You mentioned the 18-game stretch. It's really a half-season stretch as a starter for him. 38 games since, Christian Brown got hurt and he started every game he played after that. It was 17.5 points, shooting it better than 50%, 44 from 3. Decent rebounder, good defender. And I remember in the middle of that stretch, when he was really rolling, they came to Dallas and I was talking to Aaron Gordon about him. And the thing that really surprised people is because you always said about Watson, hey, if he can just become a decent 3-point shooter, he's going to be a really nice player. And he had proven that. And then you saw him doing all this stuff off the dribble. It's like, whoa, I didn't know we could do that.
Well, listen, with the Cavs' depth at ball handler, we'll hear from Kenny Atkinson and Kobe Altman in the coming days. The Cavs may need him to do some of that.
I mean, he'll be their secondary ball handler in the lineup when one of their guards is sitting, I would think, a lot of times. But I remember I was talking to Aaron Gordon. He said, dude, we see this stuff when we play pickup and things like that. We've seen him for a while. He said, he reminds me of a young Paul George. Now, I think that might be hyperbole there. Young Paul George is awfully good. But his point was, he looked at Watson as a really dynamic, athletic, versatile 6'8" wing. And, if that's what the Cavs are getting, then honestly, the deals, it's not crazy money. $22 million is not, in today's NBA, is not a crazy number. It's
here's the thing.
For starter money.
Look, you talk to different people who give you different opinions. He's 23 years old, so they're signing him for ages 23 to 26. Basically, he's 23, 24, 25 years, whatever. I feel okay about signing a player to that kind of a deal when they're in their mid-20s.
Yeah.
I'm not, you can find people that don't like paying him $22 a year. If that's when you're going to gamble,
including the Nuggets, apparently.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the Nuggets in a minute. How you guys know how I feel. When a contract gets signed, I ask the question: Can this contract be traded? I've talked to executives today who have said, I don't like that contract. But I've also talked to executives who've said, he's 23 years old. That's probably going to age pretty well. If he was 33 years old, I wouldn't like it. But 23 years old, I like it. So I don't think they could trade it for huge value this afternoon. I'm not of the concerns I have about this Cavs maneuver.
Right.
I'm concerned that they have no depth because they've hollowed out their depth to do this. I'm concerned that they now have no tradable first. So when they need to add to their depth, that they're hard capped and they have nothing to add to the team. Of the things I'm concerned about with Cleveland, whether Watson is going to be this type of player, whether they can fill out their roster properly, the level of contract is not at the top right now. Sorry.
I do think we should discuss Harden just a little bit more here. Shams had reporting in his story that he is now going to become the fourth player in league history to make over $500 million in salary. And obviously the other three are the Olympic teammates in 24 and LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. And it's just kind of a fascinating look at James Harden's career to step back. Obviously the MVP, the trip to the finals with the Thunder. But to be able to have that, this career earnings is part of what he's able to accomplish in the league, like probably somewhat underrated in terms of what he's done in the league.
Right. Well, but when you stack him up against those other three guys, like there's one pretty obvious glaring omission from his resume. And his finals trip was as a sixth man. He's not got a team to the finals as a lead guy or even as a starter, and obviously no championship. So, I mean, he's a no-brainer Hall of Famer. But when you discuss, legacy to me is an overused word. But when you discuss Harden's legacy, unfortunately, you get to the playoff failures pretty quickly.
Well, let me just say this. So, we talked about agenting, and earlier this summer, just so the recap, like I was very willing to praise Aaron Mintz and CAA for how they handled. I mean, Aaron Mintz and CAA getting Trae Young taken care of, starting with the trade out of Atlanta, and getting Walker Kessler taken care of.
Good run.
Great stuff. Rich Paul, I just said Peyton Watson. Now I'm going to shout out Mike Silverman and Troy Payne, who are Harden's agents. Last year, like I don't remember the exact date. Don't hold me to this date, but there was some point in December or January where the Clippers decided they were pulling the plug. They got off to that bad start and then they got hot, but they didn't believe in the team. Obviously, they traded Ivica Zubac. They obviously traded Harden, and then eventually they traded Kawhi, if that ever actually goes through. But Harden had this like team option, or like it was a player option, but it was only a few 12 million or 13 million guaranteed. So he's sitting there. He knows he's about to be traded, and his future contracts weren't assured. And that trade to Cleveland was manufactured by the agents. The agents went out and found the deal. Now the Cavs liked him and were watching the situation too.
Mm-hmm.
So they go out, just like the deal to Washington was partially executed by CAA. Okay. And so just like, you talk about power and the influence of power in the NBA, like, yeah, the two teams have to do it. There's all kinds of relationships that matter in trades. For example, the Cavs do this deal where Trey Mann passes through their hands to Washington. The part of the reason that Trey Mann is now in Washington is because Will Dawkins, the GM, drafted him when he was in Oklahoma City. So there's all these things that happen, right? But they get Harden into a spot where they're willing to pay him. And if you had told me when the Clippers were pulling the plug on last season and about to trade Harden away that Harden was going to end up in a 3-year, $100 million deal, all guaranteed, the following summer, I would have told you were nuts.
Harden's a pretty good businessman himself.
Agree. Well, yeah. Well, he had to play well. He played well in Cleveland. He created a relationship with head coach Kenny Atkinson, and he created a relationship with the organization. And how did he feel about moving from his hometown of LA to Cleveland? I don't know how he really felt, but you never saw it show up in his attitude or his performance on the court.
MacTin, you were a big basketball fan growing up. Who was your favorite agent as a kid?
Well, that's why we talk about what are we doing on a podcast? That's the point.
David Falk, baby. Syracuse
There
alum.
you go.
Let's go.
Was he from
With
Syracuse?
the facts.
Syracuse and MJ. Come on, let's go.
Oh, Lordy. I walked right into a Syracuse reference.
That's right.
Yeah, well, these guys are Michigan guys, Silverman and Payne, so I don't really want to give them too much credit. All right. Anyway, let's move on, McMahon, to the Nuggets part of this. So here's the thing. The Nuggets, from what I understand, offered Watson around 4 years and $70 million. That was reported elsewhere, but I checked on it. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it was at $70 million. It might have been a hair under. And they offered him that deal before.
So call it 17 a year.
Okay. They offered that deal before the Thunder put them to the test with Spencer Jones on that $6 million a year deal. And here's the thing. From what I am told, the Nuggets had options to trade Cam Johnson and get him off of their books. There were teams that were willing to do that, where they wouldn't have been penal to them, that they could have moved Cam Johnson. I'm not sure that they could have moved Christian Braun for value. Braun was injured all last year, has a $100 million contract that's just starting. They probably could have traded him, but not for actual, one of the things that they do. But they could have traded Cam Johnson, and they could have not matched on Spencer Jones, okay? They made the decision to keep those two guys. And not that Jones and Watson are exact apples to apples, because obviously one's $16 million and one's $20 million. So they had options on their plate, just like the Thunder. Okay, if the Thunder had wanted to keep Lou Dort, there were options that existed for them to do that. Okay, I know that the Thunder gave this Valentine to Lou out the door and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, the Thunder chose a different path than Lou Dort. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Nuggets are now in the second apron. They were not going to be able to keep this entire team together. Okay. I think here's the nuance. Were they willing to keep Peyton Watson? Yes. That's why they offered him a multi-year contract for $17-ish million a year. Mm-hmm. But there was a threshold in where they preferred the Cam Johnson, Spencer Jones duo and Brown. I'll put that in there too, but I don't think Brown was really moving this summer. No. And they chose that pathway. Well, so make of that what you will.
Let's talk about the pathway they chose last summer. If you want to talk about what's happened to the Nuggets roster, you got to go back to really last fall. And that's when Christian Braun got a 5-year, $125 million extension. And they couldn't come to an agreement with Peyton Watson, who at the time wanted mid-level money, wanted $14 million a year. And the Nuggets wouldn't go $1 over $10 million, was my understanding. Look, hindsight's 2020. They had to do all over again. They had to give him Peyton Watson his $14 million and waited on Christian Braun and been in discussions with him, and they'd probably been able to keep them both. But that's not the way that things played out.
Well, it might have been Christian Braun who was in a restricted free agent quagmire. It might have been deemed that one of them was going to be gone anyway.
Right. And the Spencer Jones thing was a tricky little curveball thrown by Sam Presti that added to it. There was all this noise about the Nuggets are willing to keep everybody, pay whatever luxury tax bill. Even after losing Peyton Watson, who was, one of their 5 best players, Tim Hardaway, who was the 6th Man of the Year candidate, even after losing those 2 guys from last year's roster, they have a $75 million tax bill that's staring them in the face, and they're over the second apron. To get bounced in the first round and get worse. And by the way, they got bounced in the first round by a really wounded Timberwolves team. Remember, Ant got hurt in that series. Dante DiVincenzo, unfortunately, went down with an Achilles. By the way, Peyton Watson did not play in that series. And, there were some folks with the Nuggets who were kind of looking at that situation sideways, saying he's putting business above the team right now. I didn't see the MRIs. I couldn't tell you whether that's true or not, but this is a bad summer for the Denver Nuggets, man. They're really expensive.
Well, and let's not forget that Jokic did not extend. However you want to spin that.
Yeah, and look, everything Joker has said, every indication from him is he is not ever going to consider leaving Denver as long as he's wearing an NBA uniform.
You speak Serbian, Tim?
I don't. But
okay. I haven't heard him say it in English yet. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. No, he said it in English. He said it.
Okay.
Not this summer, but
right.
Here's the thing, though. None of that stuff is binding, and there damn sure are going to be teams that are hoping that he either changes his mind or, call it what you want. And there's a ton of pressure on the Nuggets. There's pressure on the front office. There's pressure on the coaching staff. There's pressure on ownership. And that's regardless of Joker's contractual situation. You have one of the greatest players of all time who took you to the top of the mountain, and you are in serious danger of essentially wasting the rest of his career.
I think the question that you have to ask, though, is we know how great he is. And, of course, every superstar, as we've seen, Brian and I in particular covering LeBron, that if you're that great, the pursuit is to try to add as much talent around you because it just opens up your window that much longer and that much wider. However, at what point do we say that they've done everything they can to field the team around him to the point where they're in the second apron? And this could become a Milwaukee situation where you just have a finite amount of time in order to have enough resources to put around a player like that.
Or I'll give you another example. It becomes a Dirk situation where even if Joker stays, he's staying and it's awesome. It's a one franchise legend. He's loyal, but he doesn't have a chance to compete for a championship for the rest of his prime into his twilight. And not only have they gone in the second apron and done all these things, this pick that they got from Cleveland is now the only tradable pick that they have. And by the way, do you know who owns their 27 and 29 picks from 2 separate deals? I'll give you one guess.
OKC, I think.
Of course.
There you go. Right.
Well, by the way, the reason they had no tradable first was because they traded. So they were cutting payroll last year. So in the transaction they made, so Cam Johnson makes $23 million this year. Okay. And that's a factor that that's essentially what probably is slightly less, probably slightly more than Watson, but essentially that's the same salary slot. But Michael Porter Jr., who they traded for Cam Johnson, he makes $40 million this year.
Yeah.
And the differential in those two salaries was one of the primary reasons that Denver included a first-round pick to Brooklyn as part of that deal. So, that was a factor.
And it's tough when you are a team that should be contending, wants to be contending, and you're having to give up a pick to get off money.
By the way, speaking of Jokic, as we speak, Jokic is playing a friendly with the Serbian national team in Belgrade against Team France.
That's a pretty high-profile friendly.
Yeah, so the windows in here coming up in a week or so, the windows to qualify for the World Cup next summer in Qatar are happening, and so some high profile players are playing for their teams because it's hard to qualify out of Europe. And I was talking to a scout who was at the game, and Rudy Gobert is playing, and alongside Victor. And Victor was, by the way, named French national team captain, which isn't a surprise, but there's some older guys on that, like Evan Fournier is on the team, and there's some guys who've won real medals and real stuff for the French. But
Wemby's won a real medal for the French.
Silver, that's right. By the way, so anyway, I was talking to a scout, and he told me, not that this should be a surprise, MacMahon, but he told me that Rudy Gobert looks in spectacular condition.
I mean, Rudy, one thing, you can criticize him all you want. One thing the guy does is keeps himself in phenomenal shape.
Yeah. It's actually halftime. And also the scout that I'm texting with told me that Jokic was in good shape as well. And it's a 1-point game at half. I'd like to.
Hey, Joker better be in good shape because he's playing 47 minutes a game next week.
Yeah.
Actually, the one rotation player they brought in this year is Marvin Bagley III, who, he can score off the bench, but he's a journeyman.
Listen, the Cavs need another big man, and Kevin Love is out there, and that's a guy to keep an eye on for Cleveland. I think the Cavs would love to have Marvin Bagley. So they should have tried to get try to get him in that deal. Real quick on the Wolves as an aside, watch the Wolves in the next couple of days, because now that some of these, well, here's the thing. There's been some reporting. I don't know who to give credit to, but I think there's a possibility of DeMar DeRozan signing with the Nuggets.
Yeah, Haynes was, I believe.
Chris Haynes, I saw that. Yep.
Now that this is happening, some other things are falling into place. So my favorite topic, Jonathan Kuminga.
I mean, the Wolves, listen, if he's going to play for the minimum, and he absolutely should go to Minnesota because he can walk into probably a starting job at the 4.
Right. So it's still open. There's still a window there, Dave, for the Lakers to do a Kuminga sign and trade using Jaden Hardy. But my thing on the whole Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade thing is that for the Hawks to do a sign and trade, they're going to probably end up in the tax unless you can ship someone to a third team who has to be paid. And I've just been very doubtful that unless the Hawks are in love with the situation, that they're going to end up, signing and trading Kuminga. The other thing with Kuminga is a sign and trade has to be 3 years. It doesn't have to be fully guaranteed, but it can't be player options. It'll be team options. And so if Kuminga can't get a contract number that he likes in the first year, even if it's more money, this is one thing that the Lakers fans have been sort of putting Kuminga on their team in their head. And look, maybe it does get done, but Kuminga, he wouldn't control his contract, and that first year salary, even if it's higher, would be less than he thinks his value is, right or wrong. So if the Timberwolves, now that these other doors are closing, if the Timberwolves can close that deal, MacMahon, and land Jonathan Kuminga, that would be not that, you guys know how I feel about Kuminga. I think he's a highly talented, flawed player.
Are you representing Kuminga now?
If Kuminga ends
might
up,
as well shout out his agent now too, because we've already gone through the roster of everybody else in the league.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I
he wants to be
appreciate
shouted
you.
out right now.
Like I said, I am inviting scorn, and I don't even have to invite it with Dave. Dave will just dole it out. I am inviting scorn, talk about the agenting. I agree, but this is, my job is to watch the league and talk about it. I'm seeing agenting.
Can I ask you a question, Brian? Or am I interrupting you? Okay. So for Kuminga, obviously this decision will bring forth a salary for 26-27. But to me, it's more about the next 5 years beyond that, right? What he's going to be in this league. In order to achieve that, what does he need?
Opportunity
Touches, right? He wanted out of Golden State because there weren't enough touches. The Lakers willingly
goal changed every other day. Yeah.
Sure, but that was a big part of it, was not getting the touches.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers parted ways with LeBron James, and part of that equation was, well, now the ball it's clearly through Luka Doncic. is that the best situation for him to then set up himself for the next 5 years? I don't know. I feel like it could be a similar situation where he finds himself as where's the opportunity?
Well, and again, in Minnesota, there's a clear void at the 4 that you can slot him into the starting lineup between Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert, with LaMelo Ball and Ant in the backcourt. And, it's a pretty defined, like, hey, we need you in this role. And if you're going to sign a prove-it contract, which it would have to be, obviously, then, okay, let me prove myself as a guy who's going to be playing 30-plus minutes per game, for a team that is probably going to play fast and be a fun team, be a team that's going to be a playoff team. And the role it's not as clear with the Lakers. Luka's more ball dominant than Ant or LaMelo, but more so it's just like, they signed Mamu and, it's just a little bit more crowded. So again, I'm not the highest guy in the world on Kuminga, but if Minnesota can get him for the minimum, I think that's a deal that makes sense for both sides.
When you talk about, I had an agent tell me something very funny. I would never quote him. The thing about it is that it can be dangerous for a player whenever he takes the minimum because he sends the salary, or even if it's not the minimum, if it's vastly below his market, because it ends up being sort of a hole you have to dig yourself out of. And so you hear agents say, I can't let my player take the minimum, even if it makes sense. So that's something that Kuminga's got to do. But I was talking to this agent and he was saying this. He's like, you got to be careful taking the minimum, especially if you're in your 20s. And I was like, well, there are examples of players who have taken the minimum when their market has been low and then they've rebuilt their value. I'll give you a recent example, which is Kelly Oubre.
I thought you were going to say Gary Trent Jr.
Well, that's what the guy said. The guy, you jumped the thing. He's like, yeah, look at Gary Trent. Which, where is that on the NBA's investigation?
I told you,
digest
determined they have to pay the contract.
No, I know, but I know it's funny, but I'm saying on the NBA's process of they're investigating Kawhi. They're trying to deal with the Lakers situation, which we'll talk about in a second. They're trying to do expansion. They're trying to do
out if Bontemps is going to pay off his bets.
trying to do NBA Europe. The Kawhi trade, like, if Kawhi gets traded or whatever, that's all part of aspiration. Where is the Gary Trent? Like, where's the Gary Trent investigation?
They're mad that we're talking about it because they're hoping people forget it. Because they're like, look, the Bucks are on TV for I think the Bucks are on TV for the first half of a game in February, and that's it.
You know what was fascinating? And look, like, it is what it is, but when the TV schedule came out, that Zion Williamson and Pelicans only had 2 games, and not long.
One, you can't count on them being on the floor.
No, I know. I'm just
they're not even good.
Criticizing it. I'm just saying.
When Zion's on the floor, he's still exciting, but you can't bank on him being there. And there's, there's just not the buzz from him has been gone for a long time. Hey, can we go back a little bit though? Can we discuss the potential fit of DeRozan with the Nuggets? Because I think it's honestly pretty clunky.
Well, the Nuggets need space. And by the way, this is a classic case. DeRozan is, going to be moving into a minimum zone. But anyway, go ahead.
In his late 30s. And he'd be moving into a bench role for the first time in his career, which honestly is the role that I thought would be best suit him for a while. But he would, he decided he wanted to be a number 1 or number 2 option. And I get it. Like, they need bench scoring. They need a guy who can prop up the offense and give it some kind of life in the 14 minutes or so that Joker's sitting. But I don't think you can play DeRozan with Joker because DeRozan needs the ball. He doesn't space it. He's not a cutter. He doesn't do any of the things you need to really thrive off of Joker. And then that duo defensively stinks worse than morning breath after a 12-pack of Coors Light. Like, my God. So I'm just saying, I get it. It's not exactly, there's not just a ton of guys sitting out on the market, but the idea that DeRozan would would salvage the summer for the Nuggets. I don't think so, man.
Well, I don't think it would salvage it, but I would be interested to watch the 2-man game because they're both very effective. One thing about DeRozan, he moves well off the ball and he gets to the line.
Does he move well off the ball? I don't know.
I mean, he loves getting to that kind of mid-range, mid-post area and operating out of there. And a lot of times the Nuggets run.
Well, he doesn't move well off the ball like he's
Jokic
JJ Redick or Rip Hamilton. I mean, he's not running floppy, but I'm just saying, like Dave said, he will position. He gets into position.
Yeah.
So
off the dribble.
Okay. So, let me just say this. I don't want to gloss over the Clippers.
Yeah.
Because while the Clippers are dealing with a bunch of other things, I think it was nice business to get Max Strus for a 2nd-round pick. So they traded Collins, John Collins to the Pistons, which was a whole nother move that the Pistons not signing Tobias Harris and taking on John Collins. I don't know. Anyway, they got a $17 million trade exception for that. And they took on Johnny Broom in a deal to move off to help
Contavious Caldwell-Pope end up with the Sixers.
Right. So they did a roster spot move for the Sixers. So they take that 2nd-round pick that they just got for taking a roster spot and the trade exception for John Collins, and then they use that to acquire Max Strus. Look, the Clippers have other challenges, and they were actually at one time this year deemed a possible a spot for Peyton Watson. So they don't get Peyton Watson, but they get in Strus. He's 30 years old, still very much in his prime, and would be in a contract year and will compete at both ends. I actually thought I had one executive tell me the team that I liked business the most out of this was the Clippers.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid rotation player. Hopefully he can be healthy this year. Solid rotation player for a team that there's no benefit in the Clippers being bad. Guess who owns their pick this year?
I heard.
And they took an actual trade exception and turned it into, a guy who might be a human trade exception. He's an expiring contract, and there could be value in that, as the trade deadline approaches.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the Lakers. Dave, you've done a lot of reporting. You should be taking it easy in August. I feel bad for you.
I appreciate that, the sentiment.
So there's a lot out there right now. There's 3 different things with the Lakers right now. One is the fact, obviously, that Josh Kushner and Bob Iger are in the process of buying majority control of the team. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is unaffected by parts 2 and 3 that we are going to discuss here in a second. And that is what is most important for the NBA and the Lakers organization, is that there is going to be a change in controlling owner. I honestly don't fully understand what the contractual obligation of keeping Jeanie Buss as the governor is, but the one thing I know about the NBA is that there's one controlling owner. Now those you can come to an agreement that there's a rotation or whatever, but there's one controlling owner, and my understanding is that's going to be Josh Kushner. Josh Kushner is going to be the controlling owner. Now, Bob Iger's, is that contrary to anything that you've heard, Dave?
Josh Kushner lives in Miami, works in New York, has a place in Malibu.
As
Bob
one
Iger's
does.
But Bob Iger's primary residence is in Brentwood.
No, I mean, I'm not saying Bob Iger won't be in the office.
Kushner will have the largest financial stake. He'll have the largest share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, of course I've heard that. I thought we're talking more.
Here's the thing. Like, no matter what anybody wants to say, no matter what anybody wants to announce, like Mark Cuban announced when he was selling the Mavericks, one of the immutable rules of the NBA is one individual is ultimately the face of the team. Whether or not they want to be the day-to-day operations person, whether or not they want to be the public face of the team or whatever. But that individual typically is the person who has the most money. It's not always the person who has the most money in.
Yeah, the buck stops with one person ultimately.
Right. And regardless of what happens with the Buss family, Mark Walter owns 73% of the Lakers. Is that right? Or something like that?
I think it's slightly higher than that, yeah.
Okay. But that share is on process to transfer to Kushner and Iger's group. And that's, assuming no hiccups, that's going to happen. Okay. That's silo one. Mm-hmm. All right. And how they had decided to move forward with the Lakers is a big, giant story in the NBA and will be something we watch very closely. Now, Dave, part 2, which is the Buss family drama, which I know is a couple of days old now. But you have done a lot of reporting on this and have lived it for decades. I have some things I want to say, but I'll wait for you to follow you.
Well, I love this line that someone told me yesterday. It was, if somehow Jeanie Buss gets through this current fiasco and still remains the acting governor, Adam Streisand deserves the next statue outside of Crypto.com Arena in Star Plaza, because this is mired in muck and red tape and, quite frankly, the logical side of things. When you consider that in 2025, when the Buss family agreed to sell their stake to Walter, sources tell me there was a provision agreed to by all the siblings called a tag-along provision. Basically, if Walter sells at any point, we can roll in our shares to that sale at the new valuation. Now, of course, Jeanie Buss or any other of the siblings could have foresaw that it only being a 10-month ownership period for Mark Walter. But that's what it turned out to be. Jeanie Buss's lawyer, Streisand, is contending that back in 2017, when there was another round of family drama, it was determined by the court that if the Buss siblings were to sell at any point, 3 trustees out of the 6 would have to sign off on it. Jeanie Buss, who used to run the Lakers Youth Foundation, Joey Buss, who was instrumental with the Lakers G League team over the years, and Jeanie would be the 3 trustees. However, in the 8 years since that court agreement, not only did they agree to the tag-along provision, but Jeanie Buss has ousted 2 of those trustees from the organization in Jeanie and Joey.
Shanked them right in the back.
So if this ever goes in front of a judge, the judge would have all this information to consider and weigh and mete out. And at the end of the day, it still seems somewhat implausible to me that the conclusion wouldn't be that 5/6, the vast majority, wants to sell this thing. And I'm not going to be the judge to step in front of that sale.
Right. Well, we also are not legal specialists.
Right. And,
well, certainly not.
And look, the legal argument, like, I went to college for 8 years, but I sure as hell ain't a lawyer. I don't whatever, man. But just the common sense argument here. Like, I thought the statement that Shams got from the Buss 5, which is going to be the most, remember the Hamptons 5? Now we've got the Buss 5.
The Buss 5.
But the Buss 5 statement ended with, "It is time to use this opportunity to move on and exit gracefully while we still can." Now, you can argue whether they still can, but it is damn sure time to move on.
Well, that's one thing that Jeanie has going to have to weigh here about what she wants her role to be going forward. And that's something that's a conversation that can be with Bob Iger and Josh Kushner.
The NBA Succession show needs to end. We need the show's finale.
What's amazing is there's been 2 shows about the Buss family in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. The HBO show and then the Netflix show, which is the Jeanie Buss story, and neither of them are going to be the best one, which is going to be about this.
The documentary. But let me ask you this. If you're Josh Kushner and Bob Iger, I know Iger said, basically, we welcome Jeanie, love it. But he left a pretty wide little lane of wiggle room with unless things change. Why would they want her still there?
Well,
this is just a mess.
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, this is very basic, but very important. The difference between a year ago and now is that a year ago, the Buss family was the majority shareholder, and now they're not. Okay? The deal that Mark Walter made with the Buss families, with Jeanie, he had to make that deal because they were the ones deciding the control share.
That's right.
Now they are not. Okay. So one of the immutable facts I talked about with the, NBA ownership is there's one control owner. Another immutable fact is if you're a minority owner, you are just that. You are to be seen and not heard. Now, Jeanie worked out this deal, and it was an incredible deal for her. But at the end of the day, if you are a minority shareholder, you get good tickets. And that's just the truth. Okay. Yeah. I have, I know a guy who is a very small owner of an NBA team, is a sliver of a team. And he will call me and ask me, or I shouldn't say he doesn't have my number. He will message me and ask me what his team is doing because he's 100% completely in the dark. Okay.
Mark Cuban?
Well, I to this day don't understand, Mark Cuban, who's one of the most forward thinkers in the league for the last 20 years, how his viewpoint of that was so wild.
Brian also said he's a small owner. Mark's probably like 6 feet tall. So gotta be.
Anyway.
But let me ask you this.
Well, hold on.
Okay, go on.
Hold on. So that's one thing. This is now it's a significant share of the team. 18% of the Lakers is a ton of money.
Yeah, divided by 6 is like 330 some odd million apiece.
Right. Okay. Secondly, Adam Streisand, her attorney, is an excellent attorney. I do not want to ever go against him in a court of law. He has successfully argued for Jeanie in the past, and his interpretation of their family trust, which he is obviously an expert in, has delivered a winning argument. Okay? And his interpretation of this, and I'm not going to get into the chapter and verse of it because I'm not an expert, but his interpretation of this might end up being correct in front of a judge, and they may win. But here's what I know. Okay? Actions over words. What I know is this. When it came time to sell the Lakers to Mark Walters' group, it wasn't Jeanie Buss who made the decision. She had to get a vote. Mm-hmm. Okay? Interesting. And here's time to sell it again. It's not going to, well, I'm not going to.
Well, 5-1 is pretty tough numbers.
Right. But last year, she made this maneuver with her brothers, which broke some of her family's hearts and ruined. Baxter Holmes did a story about all this that was excellent, I think, back in January, February. But she had to have the votes a year ago to sell. Okay? If the vote was needed a year ago to sell, why would the vote not be needed now? But I'm going to step out of that minutia and just say that this is a fight over 18% of the Lakers. The other 70-some percent, which is the control share, is going to move on. And even though Jeanie was the governor, Jeanie was not deciding, whether to sign LeBron James or not. I mean, she may have been in the room, but that was being decided, by Mark Walter. So I think those are. You have any problem with what I just said? Either of you? Or you think I'm off?
No, okay. I that all tracks.
All right. The third slice of this is Mark Walter's personal situation, which doesn't really matter that much to the NBA anymore because he's about to exit stage left. But it is a problematic situation as you look, and there's a whole bunch of. So he has been under investigation for almost a year, and it became public that he was under investigation about 6-ish weeks ago, maybe 8. I'm not sure. Sometime this summer.
In July, yeah.
And once that happened, a whole bunch of media and also like people who have their own, just like in basketball, where there's a bunch of people like us who are reporters, who have, who do video podcasts or whatever, or people on Substack, all those people descended onto all the legal filings of all of Mark Walter's insurance companies. And every day there is more and more stuff coming out about the financial engineering that is going on. I remember when I was a teenager, my dad was a middle manager at a really big company. And I had a friend who went to the Ivy League, went to an Ivy League school. And when I was like 19 or 20 years old, I came home and my friend came and my dad was sitting there and he goes, "Hey, what are you studying there?" And he goes, "I'm studying financial engineering." This was in 1998. Okay. studying financial engineering. Oh, okay, cool. And he leaves. And my dad goes, my dad was, in his mid 40s, and he's like, financial engineering, like the engineers sit at this side of the company and the financial guys sit at that side of the company. They don't talk to each other. That we were going into a new era with financial engineering. And if you spent any time reading about Mark Walter's stuff, this is just one giant piece of financial engineering. But I do have,
or some might call it a shell game.
Storytime.
Some might call it a shell game, Brian. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
yes, but it's financial engineering. Definitely
that's a nicer way to put it.
All right. So here's my story time brought to you by SoFi. Get your money right. So when the Walter, good front offices don't just react. They make moves that simplify things and set themselves up better long term. On a personal level, consolidating high interest debt is that same kind of decision. Fewer moving pieces, more clarity. That's where a SoFi personal loan fits in. One fixed rate payment, no fees, and a more straightforward way to get things under control. A SoFi personal loan is here to help you achieve something once thought impossible: overcoming high interest credit card debt. Walk the tightrope of your finances with one low fixed rate monthly payment, no fees required, and as soon as same day funding. That's right, pull off your own debt-defying stunt with a SoFi personal loan. Visit SoFi.com/trick to learn more. Loans originated by SoFi Bank N.A., member FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. NMLS 696891. When the Walter sale closed last year, was it earlier this year, Dave? When did it actually close?
It was October 2025.
Okay. So I started talking and writing about how Abu Dhabi, Mudabala, which is the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi. And you guys know I've been to Abu Dhabi a number of times, developed relationships in some of their government offices, and have written and reported a lot about their investment in American sports and the NBA. Abu Dhabi had given $10 billion, committed $10 billion to Mark Walter's fund, which is called TWC Global.
TWG.
TWG Global, I'm sorry. Not only that, but like Abu Dhabi, as you can imagine, being, and now they're in the middle of dealing with the conflict in the Middle East, which is their whole situation has changed. But when they make an investment in something, they often set the terms because of how much money they have. And they did something when they made their partnership with Mark Walter that was very unusual. They were investing $10 billion in Mark Walter's company, and they were allowing Mark Walter to, in return, buy a percentage of their sovereign wealth fund. This had only happened one other time. But the point of all of that is that they believed so much in him that this, super elite financial operation said, not only do we want to invest in you, we want you to be our partner in our operation. So just a year ago or a year and a half ago, the respect level that Mark Walter had was immense. But here's the story that is what I'm going to tell. I was talking about this investment that Abu Dhabi made in Mark Walter's fund, and then Mark Walter's fund then buying the Lakers. And I got a call from someone attached to Mark Walter. And they said, please stop connecting Abu Dhabi with Mark Walter's purchase of the Lakers. And I said, why? Abu Dhabi gave $10 billion. and then a couple of months later, that same fund, TWG, bought the Lakers.
That's probably a coincidence, like Ballmer giving all that money to
So, hey, listen, if I'm wrong, I want to be correct. I said, why? And this person said, because Mark Walter bought the Lakers with his own money. And I said, okay. I said, please don't take offense to this because, it was bought for a $10 billion valuation.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't really actually $10 billion. First off, he and his group
75% versus
right. Not even that, because he and his group already owned 27%.
That's right.
They were buying about 50%. So they needed like $5 to $6 billion. And I said, please don't take offense to what I'm about to say. did Mark Walter personally have $6 billion? Because
It's a lot of money.
I knew that he ran an insurance company that had billions under management, but that doesn't mean you have the money yourself. I kind of got laughed at, and it was, yes, absolutely, of course. And so I was just saying, like, the common sense is, where did that? I was just like, well, so by the way, I stopped saying it. I was like, okay, if I was wrong, I won't, even though it was public information that Abu Dhabi invested in. And then when the Lakers sale was announced publicly, it said TWG. It was like right there. I was like, all right, okay, I won't connect him anymore. But I didn't understand how he would have that kind of money. If he already owned the Dodgers and he already owned Chelsea and he already owned the Sparks and he already had this, he would also have that much money. It just didn't make sense to me. And so anyway, I would just say that this whole thing is one giant financial quagmire. And
Brian, have you called that guy back in the last 2 weeks? I would be relishing that phone call. Like, hey, let's talk about that.
I'm not sure. I still am not sure what's true. I just know that, I know that, like, what Warren Buffett says. By the way, Warren Buffett has bought and invested in a lot of insurance companies, and he would say that insurance is profitable, but it's not the kind of profitable that would allow you to, be buying all these sports teams. But
I know one thing that's true. The sooner they can get Mark Walter and Jeanie Buss the hell out of the building, the better.
Well, anyway.
The lesson here, though, sorry, I hope I'm not stepping on your final point, your grand finale, Brian. But the lesson here is that the league needs to do a better job of vetting all of these major partners that are coming into it, whether that be a team sponsorship from Aspiration with the Clippers, whether that be the Board of Governors voting on Mark Walter's acquisition of the prize franchise, the crown jewel of your league, because hey, guess what? The Wall Street Journal reported that in September of last year, 2025, Mark Walter had devices seized from him as part of the Fed's investigation. In October, the NBA Board of Governors said, yep, put the red stamp on it. He's new Lakers owner. I think the NBA needs some more resources in their vetting process.
But let me just say this. Abu Dhabi doesn't mess around. And Abu Dhabi invested with him, and they didn't know.
Yeah. Well,
so
the league's not exactly.
And here's the other thing I'm going to say. Again, assume this is reported by the Wall Street Journal. I assume this is correct. They didn't find out about this, potential, financial engineering issues because, like, they did it with an investigation. It was a whistleblower.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somebody came to them and said, "Hey, this is going on." And so, like, I think there's only so much the NBA can do. What Mark Walter did was he said, here's my account with $6 billion in it. There it is right there. And the NBA is like, is this actual money from $6 billion? Yes. And the NBA is like, okay, he's got the money. He's also owns the Dodgers and owns Chelsea, which means Major League Baseball approved him. And, they're approved, with the international soccer bodies. And he's got the money, and Abu Dhabi invested with him. Like, some of this becomes self-perpetuating. And by the way, he might not have done anything illegal. This may just be risky. He's being investigated for doing something illegal. But I think the point is this. If you see something that doesn't quite make sense, and this is, again, what Warren Buffett says, if you see something that you don't understand, just stay away from it. Even if somebody else is making money on it or whatever, if you don't understand, you don't understand. I didn't understand how Mark Walter had the money to personally buy the Lakers. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't have the subpoena power or the, financial engineering doctorate from Princeton to totally understand what was going on. But it didn't make sense to me that he had the money personally to buy the Lakers. It didn't make sense to me. So make of that what you will. If you want to call me inadequate, that's fine. But you wouldn't be the first. But Dave, so the crazy thing here is that the Lakers were in the middle of this makeover for their team. They, the entire business operation has been turned over. There are people, I know of one guy who was a front office guy who was in the middle of leaving one team to go to the Lakers. And now all of a sudden they're in a hiring freeze. And it's like, well, who's going to be in charge?
Chris Paul.
I don't know.
These are the questions. And obviously the on-court product is relatively locked in. Obviously we talked about Kuminga. Who knows if that happens, but they have 16 guys on their roster. The team's mostly going to look like what's going to look like for next season. But when you are trying to contend and trying to add an 18th banner, you're going to have to win around the margins. And part of their intention going into this offseason was to use Mark Walters' resources and put it towards other ways that they can enhance the program. And, Rob Pelinka stated he wanted to hire 2 assistant general managers. He was only able to bring in 1. The other spot remains vacant, as you just said, a hiring freeze. We're going to see. I haven't been in the Lakers practice facility in months. I know they just unveiled new practice courts that they showed on social media, but part of the idea of the G League team moving to Palm Desert was to use the space that the G League team occupied and turn it into advanced training equipment and medical equipment that the players could use on a daily basis. I don't know where that stands. These are the type of things that, while we wait for the sale to be completed with Iger and Kushner, could be put on pause. And, when you're Luka Doncic and you made the NBA Finals with the Mavericks, and now it's 2 straight years without getting back to that perch and wanting to have every available advantage at your fingertips to try to get back there, when you have someone like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's now lapped you with a championship and 2 league MVPs, we'll see how patient he's going to be with this process.
And look, just like Joker can profess his loyalty to the Nuggets, there's still going to be teams that are positioning themselves and monitoring that and all that kind of thing. It's the same thing with Luka. He's done nothing but express optimism and excitement about the Lakers since he signed that extension. But it's not that long-term of an extension, and you better believe there's teams around the league that are looking at that situation and saying, hey, if this thing goes sideways, we'd sure like to get Luka midway through his prime.
Well, we'll say this, and if you're Luka, betting on the brand is pretty safe, which is why the Lakers sold for even more money than they sold for a year ago. And chances are, if they sold again in a year, they'd sell for even more, because you're betting on the brand.
Well, and the brand is so strong that despite pretty constant mismanagement through Jeanie Buss's reign, they managed to win a championship because the brand's so strong that LeBron James decided he wanted to come there and they'd be forced to trade there. Like, there's advantages to being the most glamorous franchise in basketball located in sunny Southern California.
One thing, Dave, you had a story that came out this week that's because you mentioned tag-along rights. The concept of the reason you'd have a tag-along right would be if you're a minority owner of a team and the team controls sells, you want to be able to have the right to sell your shares at the same time, because if you're buying a controlling piece of a team, you're going to pay more for it. If you're buying a piece of a team that only doesn't give you control at all, you're probably going to pay less. If the Lakers controlling share sold for a $12 billion valuation, and the Buss family keeps their 18% and they sell in a year, that would be very valuable. But I don't think they could get $12 billion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they could get. The whole reason to have a tag along right is so that you can, if you're a minority owner, it gives you an off ramp to join the highest sale possible. So that's one of the reasons why the Buss family, other than to nail Jeanie for firing all of them.
I was going to say, especially if you're a minority owner who was fired and kicked out of the building.
Yeah, one of the reasons you want to tag along right is the ability to maximize your value for your share. I assume Patrick Soon-Shiong, who is the Lakers minority shareholder, who you wrote a story about this week, had tag along rights, but he's passing. You wrote about that this week.
Yeah, he's passing, and it's significant, one, in just the sense of understanding what the entire scope of the ownership will look like whenever the Iger and Kushner sale is ratified by the Board of Governors. But it is also significant because The Athletic is reporting that if Jeanie Buss loses her legal battle and all of her siblings are free to sell their shares off, and she's left with just under 3%. The Athletic's reporting that she is interested in buying back 12% of the team somewhere to be able to hold 15% is what the requirement to be the acting governor, which was her intention to do it for 5 years at a minimum at time of the Walter sale. So we've already ticked off one of those 5 years. Well, guess what? That's 4%. That is unavailable to her. Patrick Soon-Shiong's not selling. Ed Roski Jr. has 3% out there. And then everything that's left will be under Iger and Kushner's jurisdiction. And I don't really see the motivation for them to sell back 12% to Jeanie Buss. And
well, I mean, in theory, if she had a better relationship with her siblings, she could buy them out.
Good luck.
Sure. Yeah. Three of them had a job a year ago, and now they don't because
double the price, and I'll think about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a lot of financial engineering for a basketball podcast. So, on that note, thank you very much,
needs
Dave.
A good agent.
Your friend must be pretty damn smart if he's the one out of you two to go to an Ivy League school. I feel like you could have fit an Ivy League.
Wow,
campus,
what an incredible! Is he trying to like butter me up or something? Is there some sort of ass to come here? I went to Kent State University, which is the Harvard of Portage County, Ohio.
There we go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you very much, McMahon. Thank you to our producers, Tucker and Jackson, of course, is back with us after. He went to another wedding over the weekend. All this guy does is go to weddings. Swear to God. Who knew he had so many friends?
Seriously.
All right. Thank you for listening and watching The Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you next week.
Adios, amigos.